Oh, sorry. This is gonna be what if Deku was teleported to a different world. So what I mean by that is he's gonna be pretty much like an Itsuke. If you watch Rustage videos or raps, you should. It's like his latest one. So it's called the Itsuke rap or something, whatever, right? And yeah, that's what it's gonna be like. And so let's start off. Deku is gonna have a quirk. His quirk is fire manipulation, and he fires around. I'm just gonna make him pretty much like a flame user in this world, okay? So yeah. Let's begin. Deku knows that his quirk is very. Let's say in the beginning, his parents loved him a lot. His mom, Inko, loved him, and so did Hasashi. Hasashi stayed with him for such a long time, and then he had to go into a business work. Then he left, and then sadly, Inko got the sad news that Hasashi died. And then she was pretty sad, but she still had Izuku. And Izuku was happy with his mother. Bakugo didn't really want to bully him that much, because he knows what happened to his father, he felt bad for him, and they were really good friends. So, Deku is not like a punk like Bakugo is, because he always hangs out, and Bakugo is still his usual self, but Deku will stop him time to time. Right? So yeah. And one day, he was hanging out with, let's say that during the school, people were like, do you guys want to go to school? And Deku says, no, I don't really want to become a hero, right? And they're like, why? Your quirk's so strong. He's like, well, I want to be a gamer program, because he loves playing video games. And they're like, well, that's kind of a waste of your quirk, don't you think? It's like, in a way, yes, but it's just a thing I do. Like, I've already made programs and stuff. And they're like, oh, I see. But maybe you could just be a hero for just a side job or something. Like, maybe. I might. I don't know for sure, though. Right? And then because school ended that day. Last day of school. And Bakugo went to go walk with him. And the sludge villain didn't happen. All Might captured him. And yeah. And let's say on their way there, they see a girl getting hurt. And Deku went to go help, right? Bakugo said, wait, Izuku, wait, right? And when the girl accidentally touched him, he teleported somewhere. And Bakugo's like, what the hell did you do? She's like, it's my quirk. I teleport people to different worlds. And when she said that, he was frozen. Different worlds? Can you bring them back at least? She said, I don't know how to, though. She said, no, I can't. And Bakugo was just shocked that his friend just disappeared into some different world. He's like, how do you know this is your quirk? It could be something else, right? She's like, no, I went to the quirk doctor. This is what my quirk is. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. And now Bakugo's on his knees, he's trying not to cry, but he just lets it out. He screams out loud. People rush over, and they're like, what happened? And then she told them. And they're all in shock for this boy. Right? So yeah. And when Deku woke up, because he got knocked out when he got teleported, Deku woke up in some weird grassland area. He said, wait, where am I? Kachan? Kachan! Right? He's looking around and he notices that he's nowhere to be found. He doesn't even know where the buildings are. He's very confused. He starts walking around and he sees an animal. Well, he sees the grass roaming around, like moving, and he says, oh, an animal probably. Ryan keeps walking, and then some animal with sharp teeth, and let's say some animal with sharp teeth and it looked like a saber-toothed cat. Okay, and Deku's like, what the? And he got his quirk ready because he thought it was a villain. And then, let's say a random girl, right? A random girl came by and killed it. He said, wait, that might have been a human. And she's like, what are you talking about? Right? She's like, there's different, like, I know what a human is. That was a monster. And Deku's like, no, that could have been a human. That could have been their quirk. Right? And she's like, what are you talking about? What are quirks? And then Deku's like, you don't know what a quirk is? And she's like, no, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even know who you are. That's the thing. Who are you, first of all, and why do you look like that? Pretty much Deku kind of looks like how he is in the image right now. This is what Deku's gonna look like. Right, and he's like, this is just my clothes, why? She's like, people these days are stupid. And he's like, hey, watch it. Right, and she's like, oh, what are you gonna do? And then she just has a blade and electricity starts going all over it. And Deku notices that when he said stop it, she got in defensive real quick, right? And then Deku got his fire out. Deku could use any, like he could summon fire and then control that fire, right? And he made, let's say, like a bow type, a fire type bow, right? He says, knock it off. I don't want to fight you. I don't want to hurt girls. And she's like, huh, why? Because I'm a girl? He says, well, yes, I don't hurt girls. Right? And she's like, whatever. Right? And she notices that he is kind of different from everyone else in this world. Because if he would know what a monster is, so she's like, do you need help to get to a town, I guess? And he says, yeah. And she's like, okay, follow me then. And they head to this village, and then Deku notices that there's a emblem on her arm. And yes, what's that for? The emblem? And he said, is that a tattoo? No, he said, I like your tattoo. And she's like, no, this isn't a tattoo. This is my familia. He's like, what's a familia? And he's like, where? She's like, where are you from? And he says, well, I'm from Japan. And she's like, Japan? That's not a place in this world. And he's like, oh. And then he's like, wait, what? Then he thinks back, and then he remembers the girl. He's like, oh, her quirk. Oh, no. Right? Because he starts thinking, because now his mom's going to be very mentally sad. Right? And he thinks, oh, no. And he's like, he got all sad all of a sudden. She's like, what's wrong? He's like, I'm not from here. And she's like, yeah, I can tell. And he's like, no, I mean, like, I'm not from this world. Right? And she's like, huh, sure, whatever, kid. And they walked off. And then she just took him to the town. She's like, okay, you could buy equipment out, and for you, I would figure out what the species are in this world. See you, kid. Right, and walks off. And he also notices that she had a copper, like, bracelet in a way. And she's like, He thinks, no, not copper, a silver. He's like, huh, wonder what that's about. And he sees, he's like, okay, I guess I should probably get to know some stuff. And he notices that he still had money in his pocket. And he went to go check at the cash register. He went to inside a store and said, hey, do you know what this could be worth to you guys? And this girl this man that he just said that to had cat ears. He said, huh, cat ears. And he's like, oh, this, and then he looks at it, and let's say it's like $1. He says, oh, that's 100. He's like, oh, that's 100. How do you have $100, sir? Good. And he's like, wait, that's 100. Oh, okay, right? Because they still use dollars, but it's a lot different, you know. In like the meaning, I guess. So yeah. And he's like, I just been saving up, right? And then he pulls out 50. He's like, so what's this? He says $50,000. right? And Deku's like, holy crap. He's like, holy. And then the man asks, are you a nobleman? Why do right? And he says, no, 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 no. I'm just a, he says, wait, are you an adventurer? He says, what's an adventurer? And he's like, he's like, you don't know what that is? He says, no, I'm not from here, right? Rubbing his back in his neck, laughing about it. And he's like, well, wherever you're from, they probably should have had this, but he's like, I'll pay you $100 if you can give me everything that you know about this world. He says, yeah, sure. And he's like, then he goes to like different areas, and he says, huh. And then he notices a sign, and he says, I can't read here. He's like, I can't read. Come on. Right? He's like, I can't read. Are you serious? Right? And he's like, wait, you can't read? He's like, no, sorry. And then because he's liking this this man, we're going to call him James. James, yes, what's your name, sir? He says, my name is James. He says, well, James, can I tell you something? Because I'm going to make this guy named James a really good friend to Azuka so he could know. And he says, oh, I see. So you're saying in your world, there's abilities and you guys call them quirks? And he says, yes. He said, huh, did yours transfer here when you came? He said, yes, mine did. And he said, really, what is it? And then he shows he can make fire and manipulate it. He says, huh, people, if they saw you with that, they'd think that you are a magic user. He says, huh, so there's magic in your world, I'm guessing? He says, yeah. He says, what's yours? He said, mine is a healing. I can heal. I'm just mostly trained with that because if there's a fire in my building, I could just get it out. Well, and he says, well, are you looking for help at all, sir? Deku says, and Deku's trying to get more money around. He says, yes, I actually am. I'm looking for employees. And I'm gonna guess that you're thinking to help me? He says, yes, I would love to, if that's okay with you. Right? And he says, yeah. He says, yeah, when he says, okay, what do you want me to do first? He's like, whoa, kid. He's like, oh, so you like getting onto it, huh? He says, yes, I'm a very hard worker, sir. He says, I see. And then Deku thinks, wait, my phone. He pulls out his phone and it looks like it still works. He could figure out what's going on in his world, but he cannot contact anyone. And then he said, is that some device from your world? He says, yes. I can't contact anyone though. He says, I'm sorry. He says, it's okay. I can still catch up what's going on in my world. Right? He says, that's amazing. And he says, well, I need to refill some stuff. You mind watching the cash register? He says, yeah, sure. And let's say the girl that helped him out earlier and saw him started working. She said, wow, you're already on the pace, huh? He said, well, yeah. Right. And she's like, well, I need let's say that she said a healing potion. And he's like, oh, sure. And he goes and he went to go ask. He's like, what are healing? He's like, where are the healing potions? And he said, oh, look for the vitals that are red, dark red, not light red. Light red is poison, dark red is healing, okay? And he saw this dark red potion. He's like, okay, is this what you're looking for? And she said, yeah, thank you. And she pays him $1. No, 50 cents, because let's say 50 cents in this world is it's like $2-3 or no. Yeah, just say $1. And the potion was $1, so yeah. It's like, thank you, have a good day. Right? She's like, yeah. And she's like, wait, do you have a place to stay at all during here? And he said, and then he just thought about it. He's like, no, I do not. Fuck. Right? He said that in his head. He said, no, I do not. And then he said, fuck in his head. He's like, god damn it. And she's like, well, I guess when you're done, just go to that hotel room and say you're with Ikatsuki. Or, no, just go to that hotel and I'll get you. Here, I'll just hang around. No, she's like, fine, I'll just hang around for a little bit until you get done. And He's like, what? And he's like, okay. And more people come in. He's starting to learn a little bit by little. And when he was done, he said, thank you, sir. Oh, come back tomorrow. He says, you better, kid. We're going to be busy. He's like, why? And he notices that it's snowing here. He says, oh, is it winter here? And he says, yes, it's midwinter. Tomorrow's our event. And he's like, what's the event, sir? He says, well, our event is, do you know, he's like, you probably don't know this. It's called Christmas. He's like, oh, yeah, we had Christmas back in my place. I don't know if it means the same. He's like, well, our Christmas is meant for, like, a great hero that slayed a dragon for us. Right? And he's like, oh, I see. He's like, oh, I see. Well, that's amazing. He's like, yes, but he did die, sadly. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, no, it's not your fault. You didn't know. And Ikati's kind of noticing that he barely knows anything. She's like, so, what's up with you? Why don't you know a lot? Well, and then he's like, well, and then the owner says, James says, well, that's kind of personal, ma'am. And she's like, fine, whatever. You done? She's like, he says, yeah. And then she says, okay, follow me. And he says, I'll see you tomorrow, sir. He says, okay then. And he notices that his clothes is dirty, so he said, is there like a shop where I could get clothes? And she said, yeah. She said, yeah. And they started walking, and let's say during that, he walked by a party, right? And he says, huh, what are those people? She says, well, those are a party. He says, what's a party then? A party is where a group of people from a guild fight together, and yeah, that was their party. It's like, I see. Huh, they look strong. She's like, yeah, but they're probably, and then she looks at their wrist, and she says, no, not really. He says, why is that? Then she says, well, they're, copper. I'm silver, so it doesn't really matter to me. Like, oh, I see. So there's level based off pretty much. She's like, yeah. She says, yeah. And then let's say those adventurers, right, noticed that Deku was with her. And they said, oh, why don't you just come with us instead of this loser? She says, then he just says, no, she just says, no, I'm good. Thank you, though. Right, and Deku kind of got shocked by this. He didn't notice that people were watching them, and they looked drunk. And he's like, oh, are you guys... He's like, oh, and then he tells Ikatsuki they're drunk, and she says, oh, I see. She says, oh, I see. And then she says, so we're gonna leave now. He's like, oh, why not? Why don't you just come with us instead of him? Right? And she says, please leave me alone. And she knows that she could take on a group, but she sees that there's a tank, a healer, and an assassin, and an archer, so she knows it's going to be a little harder. Come on. Sorry about that. But crap, where was I? But during that, Deku made a bow and pointed it at them. He said, leave her alone. Right? And they noticed that his magic, they think its magic is strong. They could feel it. Because, let's say his quirk pretty much transferred into magic. And it was like an aura that they could feel. And they said, yeah, sure, whatever, and ran off. And then he's like, I wonder why they ran off. That was just so low. That was barely anything. Right. And she's like, it's barely anything. That was a high aura. And he's like, what is aura? And she's like, okay, kid, what? You're going to have to tell me stuff if you're going to stay with me for tonight. He's like, what? Wait, I could just pay for my own room. She says, really? Show me. And then he pulls out 50,000, and then he shows her 100,000. She's like, how the hell? Are you a nobleman? And he says, no, I'm not. And she's like, oh, okay. And she's like, well, you're gonna have to need that money later on in the future for if you're gonna get weapons and stuff. And he's like, oh, okay. And they go there. She tells them that they're with her. She pays a little bit extra, and they go to bed. Deku just sleeps on the floor, right? Because it was a one bedroom. And then he's like, okay. He gets up early and gets to work, and he notices that it was busy, so he got in time, checked himself in, and asked what he needs to do. He says, probably just go stock stuff. And then he's like, I don't know how to read. He's like, oh yeah, I'll have to teach you that. I'll give you a book for some Christmas, I guess. He's like, huh, so you guys just give gifts and stuff? He's like, yeah. And today's your last day until, like, he says, until a month. He's like, a month? Okay. Right. And Deku's thinking, he's like talking to him, because let's say the day ended, and let's say he's like, should I be an adventurer? Like, he's talking to James about it. He's like, well, if you become a adventurer, it's going to be harder for you to come to work. If you do, you can't work here. He says, oh, then I won't. He's like, no, you should. And he's like, but why? But I want to help you. He says, you could still help when you have free time, right? He's like, are you sure? He's like, yes, I'm sure. Now go be an adventurer. Go help the world, I guess, right? He's laughing about it, right? He's like, yeah, sure. And he goes off. He meets up with Ikatsuki and says, well, where should we go? He's like, I want to become an adventurer. Where should I go? And she's like, well, first we got to go to a guild and sign you up there. And he said, oh, okay. They go to the guild, and he told him that he wants to sign up there, and people were like, oh, he's going to be a newbie instantly, right? He's just not even going to have, like, copper or anything. And when they go there, and they have to touch this orb to see what their power is, and see what their role is. And when they touched it, it said tier tier S. And everyone, because it's out in the middle of the area, and people heard that they're like a tier S hero, adventurer, right? And he's like, and they're like, what's his role though? Roll anything. They notice anything, so everyone's like, wait, he could use magic? He could be he could use this. He could use archery, magic, he could be a knight, like tanks and stuff like that. And he's like, so, what type of missions can I do? And he's like, so, yeah. And they're like, wow, you're pretty strong, kid. It's like, thank you. And let's say that they gave him an advisory, and Deku's advisory is a girl named Ryu. Yeah, Ryu. And Ryu is an elf. And she says, oh, hello, and looks at her stats. She's like, oh, wow, you're very strong, sir. And he says, oh, thank you. And she says, yes, you're very welcome. So, since you're very this strong, and you're an S tier, he's like, what's an S tier? Right, and she's like, oh, yeah, you just started, huh? He's like, yeah. And then she says, well, an S tier is pretty much a person that, is a person that's very strong, stronger than a copper. You're pretty much skilled with a silver. And he's like, huh. And he's like, so what, do I get a bracelet like them? Or she says, no, not yet. Until when you become copper level, you'll get a copper. And he's like, so what's the highest? And then she said, we've only had one highest here. Well, there's only been one highest in the whole entire kingdom in the world. And she says, oh, indeed. He says, who? And she says, our king. That can only die by a skilled fighter. But, well, let's just say that, well, he died. He was a great warrior. That's what we're actually having an event about him. Like, oh, him. I see. And do you know what it was? And she said, yes, Celestial Dragon. He's like, Celestial Dragon, huh? That's cool. She's like, yes, very powerful. Right? And that's what people try to become. But a lot of people die in the dungeons and stuff. Right? And that's like, and then she says, oh, yes, dungeons, that's how you level up. He's like, oh, I see. And then he says, oh, wait, I heard there's this girl named Ikatsuki. She's like, oh, yes, my other client. And he says, and she told me about familias. I don't really know that much about them. Would you really like to help? Would you help me with that? She says, yes, I would love to. Right? And they talk about how there's multiple gods in this world, but they can't use their powers. Right? And he's like, oh, I see. And yes, I'm kind of adding different. Okay, so if you're getting confused, I'm adding different worlds into this, okay? So yeah, from like different Ikatsuki animes and stuff. So yeah, let's keep going. And he's like, and then pretty much they ended the day like that. He talks and he talks, and he's like, so then he shows him all her money, all of his money, and it's $250, three $100, and let's say $10 bills, right? And she's like, wow, you're very rich in this. And he says, oh, thanks, I guess. And he's like, so where can I buy the best armor or stuff like that? She says, well, since you can do anything, you can wield anything. It's based off what you like. He says, well, then he thinks back that he used to do archery with his arrow, and he knows how to do that. He's like, I don't need to make a bow. I don't need to buy a bow. Right? And she's like, why is that? Well, and then she shows him that that he can make anything with his flames. She's like, huh. Maybe, wait, you should probably get a sword, though. He's like, a sword? Why? And she says, well, your sword could probably get engulfed with that flame, and it won't damage the sword. It's like the type of sword that you buy. Oh, and then she said, never buy magic swords. He says, yes, I could probably know. And she's like, why? And she says, oh, is that so? You want to tell me? He says, sure. And the books I used to read, and they said that magic swords can break easily after their use, so it's not useful and you can't really trust it in battles. She says, correct. Smart kid. She says, and then he says, thank you. Respect. And he's like, well, I should get going. Which level? And then he says, wait, how many levels are in this dungeon? And then she says, well, there's about 500. And he's like, oh, I see. But there's other dungeons around the world. But we don't call them dungeons, we call them labyrinths. Some people call them dungeons, and some people call them labyrinths. I just call them labyrinths. He says, okay, I'll just use them by their right name. Labyrinths. Right? So yeah, hold on. Okay. Yeah. And let's say HK heard this, and she's like, wow, he's really strong. I should probably tell my goddess, right? And yeah, and let's say that he went home, that he went to the hotel, or let's say he's like, okay, I'm gonna get a little place to stay at for now. Then he thinks, wait, maybe I should just stay with Ikatsuki for now. And he just says, okay, I'm just gonna stay with her until I find a familia. Maybe the familia will have a house I could stay in, right? And he thinks about it, and yeah, okay. I'm gonna pause it real quick for I could find an image, and yeah, give me a second. Oh wait, is it paused? Oh no. This is gotta suffices if I'm right. So yeah. This is gonna be the familia that he joins, the suffices familia. So yeah. Yeah, so he's thinking, and he accidentally bumped into Physis. It wasn't on purpose. He just said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am," and she says, "It's okay. Just be watching. Just be careful, okay?" And he says, "Yes, thank you," right, and walks off. into the dungeon, and she says, "Are you going to the dungeon?" And he says, "Yes, I am, ma'am." He says, "Huh?" And she's like, "Without a party?" "Well, yeah." And she says, "Wait, you don't even have a bracelet. What level are you going on, kid?" Well, and then he says, "Well, the level I'm going on is my advisor said that I should go to level 20, the floor 20. Floor 20? That's pretty strong for a newbie." Well, and then he says, "Well, do you want me to come with me if I can show you?" And she's like, "Sure." And Hephaestus goes with him, and she looks at his stats, and she's shocked, and he says, "See, ma'am, I could do it." And starts going, and then she grabs him and says, "Hey, I got a question for you." And he says, "Yes, would you want to join my familia?" And he said, "Yes, sure. I was looking for one, actually." And she said, "Perfect, now let's go." And he's like, "Wait, where am I going?" And Itsuke, yeah, I think her name was Itsuke. If it wasn't, sorry. Itsuke, I'm gonna call her now. Itsuke, is into different. She's into Hermes familia. Okay, so Hermes is kind of mad that she just got him, that Hermes got this boy before she did, right? And yeah, so, and he's like, "No, kid, do you want to join mine?" Right? And he's like, "Hermes," right? And Hephaestus thinks that he's gonna join her, and he says, "Hermes, no, I'm good." And he says, "Are you coming, ma'am?" And then he says, "Wait, what's your name, actually? You never told me what goddess you are." He says, "I am the goddess of forge." And then he says, "Hephaestus, right?" She says, "Yes, I am." She's like, "Huh, so I guess in those..." Then he starts mumbling to himself, "I guess in this world that some of the genders are flocked, And he just keeps talking to himself. He's like, no. Then Hephaestus hits him on the side and says, "Okay, let's go." Right? And she takes him to the place, and it's a really nice mansion. He says, "Oh, wow, this is nice." She says, "Yes, you can stay here if you want." And he says, "Yes, he says, he says, "Really?" She says, "Yeah, if you want to." And he says, "Oh, okay then." And she says, "Well, I guess if you're going in, you should probably get a supporter or maybe make a little party." He says, "Huh, I see." He's like, "Oh, okay." And then he says, "So who's in your party, or who's in your familia?" She says, "Well, I have people around the area and around the world that join me, but they have to check up. But I have to check on them time to time." So yeah, he says, "Oh, okay." And he accidentally bumped into a guy with red hair, and he just has black clothes. And Deku is pretty much wearing the exact same clothes that I had in the other image, but he it's a little he pretty much just bought the exact same clothes over like 5 times, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir." He says, "Huh, newbie." He says, "Hephaestus." He says, "Ma'am, who's this?" And she said, "This is a new guy. He's as strong as you." And he's like, "Huh, what are you, silver?" He says, "No, I'm not. I don't even have one." He's like, "Wait, how are you as skilled as me then?" And then she says, "Well, he can." The thing is, well, he's on level with. He could use anything he wants into his ability, right? And he's like, "Huh, can you use magic?" He says, "Yes, I can." And makes a bow, a fire bow with arrows with it. He's like, "Wow, you are pretty strong, huh?" He says, "Yes, thank you." He says, "Yeah." He's like, "Huh, so does he have a party?" And she says, "No." He's like, "You doesn't have a party because no one likes." And he's like, "Hey, that's hurtful. You know I still love you though, right?" Because he likes him. And he says, "Oh, I could you want to be in a party with me, I guess? And he said, sure. We have the same type of level. I guess we should then, huh? He says, yeah. And then he's like, my name's Will. What about you? He says, mine is Izuku. Just call me Deku then. He says, Deku, huh? I like it. Not bad for a name. He's like, okay, if you say so. And yeah. He's like, you want to go to the dungeon tomorrow then? He says, for sure. I was planning that anyways. He's like, okay. And they head off. Let's say that they went to bed. Deku got into his room and went to bed also. Right? So yeah. Sorry. But let's say during that, when he was sleeping, that a girl kind of was creeping on him. He noticed this and said, hello? And this girl jumped up and said, sorry, I just didn't know who you were. And Will notices this and he says, little bits, come on. Right? And then Will thought, wait, he should join our group instead. Right? And he got Deku and said, hey, you should actually join ours. He says, oh, what's your group? And he says, well, it has me, this girl, and he says, and then he's like, what's your name? And she says, Lily. And he says, well, hello, Lily. And he's like, are you also in this party? She says, yes, I am. And Will's like, yeah, but there's another kid that's not in ours. He says, oh, really? So yes. He says, his name is Bell. Bell Cornell. He's like, oh, nice. He says, is he on level with us? He's like, yes. Lily is a little higher than me. Not that much, though. And she says, well, just because I trained with you, right? And he's like, yeah, whatever. He's like, who cares? Right? And she's like, it does matter. I don't know how I'm strong. Like, and they're having their little argument. He's like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll join you guys. And he's like, great. I'll tell Belle when we go get him tomorrow. He's like, so what floor can you go on? Just anyways, should know before. He says, well, my advisor said I should go to floor. Look, I should start, I guess, at floor 20. She said, and keep progressing. He's like, a little bit just like, wait, aren't you a newbie though? He says, well, if our goddess will, she'll tell you that. Here, goddess. And then they go to goddess Hermes, and Hermes is like, yes, Will and Lil. And he says, oh, hey, Zuko. And then she says, oh, hey, Zuko. And he says, well, little bitch kind of doesn't believe me that he's as strong as you said. And as he says, she's like, I have to do this to everyone, I feel like. And she's like, no, not to everyone, but I guess if you want to. She's like, hold on, I have his records already. She's like, really? She's like, oh, okay. They go, and she looks at him, and she sees that he's an S tier class. She's like, wow, you are strong. Like, yeah. He's like, yeah, it's nothing really. And then he notices that it's night, so he's like, okay, I gotta get to bed and wake up early. He says, why? Well, I'm gonna go do my workout and then go with you guys and probably buy a weapon. He says, oh, okay. And they go off. Deku wakes up pretty early. Hephaestus is up and he says, already? She says, yeah, I'm just gonna go on a run around the place, probably, and then go pick up a sword. He's like, I'm just gonna go look for a weapon that could be more helpful during our mission today, or during our exploring. She's like, okay, go ahead. See you later. Right? And she says, see you later. And tell them, and he says, wait, actually tell them that I'll be at the dungeon waiting. And she says, okay. And Hephaestus is kind of liking this kid. She says, wait, why am I getting feelings for him? A goddess shouldn't be getting feelings for a human, should they? Right? And she's contemplating with that. And let's say when Deku left, she's like kind of on the ground. She's just sitting, thinking about it. And then then Will comes by and she says, hey goddess, do you know where that newbie, where Izuku went, or Deku went? She says, well, he went, told you guys that he said to tell you that he was just gonna meet you guys at the dungeon. She's like, oh, okay. And he's like, well, we're gonna go get Belle and stuff. He's like, okay, be safe, please. He says, you know we won't. She's like, please do though. Right? And yeah, they go get to Belle, and they get Belle, and Belle doesn't know who Deku is, so he's like, huh. So what's he like? He said, and Will says, very nice and kind. He's like you, Belle, but a lot of times stronger. I feel like maybe, who knows? He says, hey, come on. He could probably and Belle and him are pretty much the exact same level, right? And he goes, and Deku bought 2 daggers because he knows how to use knives very well. Because one time he didn't have a screwdriver, so he just used the dagger that he had laying around. Right? So yeah. And he's like, oh, so you like knives, he says? He says, yeah, in a way. He says, yeah, I do. They're pretty useful to use. He says, yes, very useful for me. He says, yeah, I see. He's like, oh, okay. Well, we should probably get going, should we? He says, yeah. He's like, yeah, we probably should. And they go off into the dungeon, and Belle's like, so what floor did your advisory start you off? Mine said I should start off at 20. Well, mine said I should start off at 5, and then I progressed on into 35. And he says, oh, wow. Mine just said I should start at 20. And she's like, wow. He's like, well, remember, Belle, you were pretty weak in the beginning. He's like, yeah, you aren't lying. I almost got killed by a Minotaur. He's like, huh, Minotaurs, eh? He says, oh, really? Who did you kill it? He says, no, a girl saved me. He says, nice. He says, well, you're probably in debt. You probably owe her, huh? And he's like, yeah, probably should, huh? And he's like, yeah. And let's say that they encountered a whole pack of ants, ant monster type things, right? And he's like, okay, guys, you know what the plan is. And he's like, Deku's like, wait, what's the plan? And he's like, oh yeah, you're gonna come with me. Will you block magic? You know what? Little bits cover us. And he says, okay. And she says, like, yeah, I gotcha. And Deku's like, gotcha. And they both charge in. Deku has a knife that Hephaestus made him already, because she's starting to like him a lot more than just a normal, like, child to her, right? And, yeah. And Belle's like, oh, wow, you got a knife from her too? He's like, yeah. And then he notices that Deku has another just plain knife. He's like, huh, you like knife? He's like, so you are kind of like me. He says, in a way. And then Deku is just slicing. And let's say a little bit is starting to get us around. He started falling back. And he got out of the bow when he was charging at them and used fire. He said, flame. He said, fire fist. And he just engulfed his 2 blades into fire. He says, fire cover. He says, fire full, hellfire, right? And it covers the swords entirely. He says, wow. He says, Belle got caught off guard, right? He's like, he doesn't have to use any magic. He doesn't have to say magic or anything. Just said the name of it, pretty much, right? And yeah, they were fighting, and let's say they got down to floor 25. He's like, huh, a lot of exhaust. He's like, oh, that's exhausting, right? He's like, yeah, you should probably pick up the gems that they drop. He's like, yeah, I probably should, huh? And he picks them up, and yeah. they start, and let's say that they were done. They're like, okay, I guess we should be done for today. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna probably stay down here for a little longer if that's okay with you guys. He says, yeah, go ahead. Just don't progress so far, or you'll leave us in the dust, right? They're laughing about it. They're like, he's like, yeah, right, laughing, and well, in little bits are just talking, and he's like, huh. So then Deku's like, okay, see you guys. And let's say right at that moment they hear a person screaming. Deku rushed over to it, and it was a girl, but it looks like a type bad type of girl. He says maybe this is a race, and he sees people trying to looking for her and trying to kill her. So Deku ran up to her and blocked her, put her under a cloak, and then they said, "Have you seen a girl around here?" And he said, "No." He says, "What's under the cloak?" He says, "My bag. I've just been resting." He says, "Okay." And he says, "Thank you." He says, "Whatever." And so he's like, "I think I found her over here." Right? Because it's a party of 10. Right? He's like, "I don't think I could take on that many people if I tried." Right? Maybe with Will and them, but I ran ahead of them pretty far. Right? And let's say when they got there, they're like, "Deku, what's going on?" Right? And he says, "Well, I found her." And they look and they see a girl. Right? And like, who's she? Yeah, and they're like, what the? Like, what the? And they're like, Deku, get away from that. That's a monster. Bell's like, what? Bell's like, wait, guys. And he's like, we should probably let Deku explain himself first, right? He says, yeah, but right. He's like, we should probably let him explain. Right? And they're like, I guess, but first, he's like, first we gotta hide her. He's like, and they're like, what are you talking about, Deku? And he's like, just trust me for once. He's like, just trust me on this. They're like, fine, whatever. And they go off and they bring the girl with her and with them, and they said, okay, now you got explaining to do. What's going on? And he says, well, she could. This monster, since I've been here, can talk. And she's like, please don't hurt me. And she said that, and they got all caught off guard. And they're like, don't hurt you, but he's like, I think she's different from them. And they're like, they don't know what to do really. And Bell made the decision that he should, I guess, stick with her and talk to their goddess about it. And he's like, I guess we should talk to goddess about this, right? And they say, yeah, it's probably the best bet. And yeah, right. Sorry. But they're like, I guess we should probably talk about this to God. Deck is like, yeah. He says, I'm gonna end it here though. See you guys. Have a good day. Bye.